Hello out there. We're on the air. Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Bitcoin Journey. Actionable and logical discussion for Bitcoiners and future Bitcoiners. We got a good show today. I hope. I always hope it's going to be a good show, but you never really know. Anything goes on live TV. It's kind of weird, honestly, that the YouTube is happening. Chrysler, good morning, my good man. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, Rumble. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully it's a little bit warmer wherever you are than it is here. I think the cold snap is over. Let's do a quick, we got the metrics. We'll do a quick metric of the weather here in the prairies. Minus 37. So we're heading back towards summer. Minus 37. We're on the downslide towards summer. Great idea from Rick here. While I pull up the chat, today's episode, as you can see, the title is A Huge Opportunity for Financial Advisors. So the way I've been structuring the show is, like I said, for logical, actionable discussion about Bitcoin. There's going to be some for very new people, some for more advanced Bitcoiners, some for financial advisors. This one is going to be specifically for financial advisors, but also if you're somebody who invests with a financial advisor. And I have kind of a theory of how this is all going to play out, and we're going to talk about it. So in the meantime, we'll get to the metrics. Sleeping today, didn't have this loaded up. So we are currently at block height 826,033. And that means, for those maybe new to the show, to the chat here, that means that since January the 3rd, 2009, there's been 826,000 Bitcoin blocks mined. We're at about 19.5 million Bitcoin that have been mined, put into circulation, with only 1.5 million left for the next 120 years. So that's where we're at. Things are chugging along. We passed another 1,000 block Rubicon, and things are looking good in Bitcoin. Let's do a quick update on the hash rate. For those who are unfamiliar with the hash rate, that is the total amount of computing power in the Bitcoin network, securing the Bitcoin network. And obviously, the higher that metric is, the better for Bitcoin. So we can see it here. This happened in 2021. This is when China banned Bitcoin mining, dropped about half. And since then, well, it recovered in about a year. So people just plugged into a different source, different country, kind of furthering the game theory of Bitcoin itself. The countries, businesses, whoever tries to fight Bitcoin, whoever tries to attack Bitcoin usually ends up on the wrong side of things. And since then, it's skyrocketed to an all-time high, which is where we're at today. The metrics, the fees today, if you're transacting on the Bitcoin Layer 1 network, you're paying 66 sats per VByte on average right now. The price today has dropped slightly, I think. I don't know. $42,922 US dollars for one Bitcoin. Last year, this time, you could have purchased one Bitcoin for $21,183. So this time last year was when the price started to rise. We can see in these last couple metrics, it went from 18, which is where it was for like the last 2 months, to 20 to 21,000. So it is cool to look back, I think, at where Bitcoin has been, because it's usually a pretty good indication of where it's going as well. Bitcoin follows the same 4-year cycle for the most part because of its halving schedule. 4 years ago today, in line with the halving, you could have purchased one Bitcoin for $8,731. Moscow time today, $1 US will get you 2,324 Satoshis. The price in Canada today of one Bitcoin is 57,855 Canadian dollars. Moose Jaw time, $1 Canadian, one loonie will get you 1,724 Satoshis. So that's the metrics today. Nothing crazy to report on this fine morning. We do have a couple things to get through, though, before we get into the financial advisor aspect of the show. Let's start with We'll start with the Bitcoin journey. So I've been doing this show for a couple months now. And before I started, I had this idea that I was going to do a Bitcoin course for people. So for Bitcoin beginners, I'm going to have before the end of January, hopefully this week, honestly, but hopefully before the end of January, I'm going to have a new course, and it's going to be for people who have never done a Bitcoin transaction before, never bought Bitcoin. So we're going to walk through from zero to holding your own Bitcoin. So you buy, you send it, you store it, and everything in between, best practices, privacy tips, everything you need to know from the second you start to going off on your own. And it is called the Bitcoin journey because even at the end of that course, that's kind of where everything is going to begin for a lot of people. Some people might stop there with their Bitcoin, put it away, dig a hole in their backyard and put their private key in there. But for the most part, they will become Bitcoiners. They will further their learning down the line here. So that's, I think, going to be a very positive thing. So keep that in mind. I think if there's any people in your life that could use that, it's going to be a pretty cool course, I think, because it's going to have 2 check-ins with me. So halfway through, we're going to do a check-in just to see how everything's going, any questions. And then we're going to do it at the end. Before you go off on your own, or before they go off on their own, they're going to have a check-in with me. And if they get through that course within the allotted 21 days, I'm actually going to be refunding half of their course fee. So you always have to have some incentives in there. And I think that this is going to be a great course for people who are just getting into Bitcoin. So keep that in mind if you have anybody in your life who would be interested in that. But the reason why I talk about that is because yesterday I was filming an episode. I'm kind of at the end of it right now, loading everything onto the website, finalizing a few things. But I was doing a video yesterday and I was explaining the whole mining process, explaining how everything works kind of behind the scenes. And I did a Bitcoin transaction on Sparrow Wallet. So I sent Bitcoin from Sparrow to another Sparrow wallet. And it's very cool. Something I think we take for granted as Bitcoiners. We usually just send Bitcoin and forget about it. But if you do a Bitcoin transaction from start to finish, paste it in there, you set the fee, you send it, you broadcast it, then you follow it on the mempool and wait for it to get into the next block. And I just think the whole process itself is so cool, and it's something that we take for granted. And how simple it is. I saw a tweet yesterday, and I probably lost it now. But there was a tweet yesterday that I saw that was basically talking about somebody's experience at the bank recently. And if you compare how difficult it can be to deal with transacting with the bank, trying to send money somewhere to another country, to a company that they don't like, whatever that may be, dealing with the banks right now is extremely difficult from my experience and from many others' experience. And with this, I didn't need anybody's permission. From start to finish, I sent value to somebody else. In this case, it was myself. But I sent money to somebody else in 5 minutes. Transaction was approved, confirmed, and settled, totally settled. Didn't have to wait 2 or 3 days for the behind the scenes MasterCard to make the payment, Interact to make the payment. Everything was done. Everything was settled in 5 minutes. And yes, we're not going to be doing that for every transaction on the layer 1, but even cooler than that is we do have the Lightning Network now that wouldn't even take 5 minutes to do. So that's one aspect I think that, like I said, we do take for granted as Bitcoiners, just how cool and efficient the process is without requiring anybody's permission to do it. So if you are somebody who's just learning about Bitcoin and you're kind of new to this, what I would suggest is I would just take like $100. Take $100, consider that as an investment into your education here. Set up a Sparrow wallet, set up a Phoenix wallet, and set up a wallet of Satoshi. And just kind of send it back and forth. Watch the transaction. Use the mempool.space resource. And I think just by going through that, you're going to have a very good understanding of what's happening and why it's so valuable. Because everybody says Bitcoin, what's the value of Bitcoin? You can't hold it. What's the intrinsic value of Bitcoin? If you do a transaction from start to finish and watch it get confirmed and settled on the Bitcoin layer 1 network, I think you'll see pretty quick what the value of Bitcoin is. Second one here. I was going to bring up a tweet from British Hodl, but I don't think it's worth bringing up. Yesterday we talked about British Hodl. I said he was underrated. I still believe that. But he made a tweet yesterday, and I don't know, obviously he probably didn't see my video, but he clarified everything that I had said. He's like, I just want to be clear that my audience is not the $1,000 DCA gang or $100 DCA gang. My audience is the $5 million real estate funds that are going to be moving into Bitcoin. So that was kind of interesting. I thought that he just further clarified exactly what I said yesterday. He's a good follow on Twitter, though. So if you're not yet, make sure to check him out on the YouTube and the Twitters. British Hodl, quite the guy. So let's get into this. Today's episode is going to be focused on financial advisors. And I should have had this brought up already, but it's impossible to find posts on LinkedIn when you comment on them. Oh, here it is. So I'm going to read this, and then it's going to tie into kind of what we're talking about today. So on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's a wild place. The majority of people who are in LinkedIn are still have no idea what's happening in Bitcoin. For the last couple of years, there's been a couple Bitcoiners that I found on there, and it seems to be ramping up more and more. And this is going to be a good example of that, I think. So I've been getting into this little LinkedIn debate with this fella named John Coffey, who's an author on financial markets, an author. And his opinion on Bitcoin obviously is not what ours is. So I just had a few questions, had a few comments, and it turned into this very long chain of comments back and forth. So then this guy decides to chime in, Ian Stevenson. So he said, a straw man, well done. You should strive to understand what money is before showing your lack of understanding to me. A virtually fail-safe medium of recording anonymous transactions will guarantee only that a worthless set of transactions persists when the value of the transactions reduce rapidly to zero, which it ultimately will when the value has no basis other than herd optimism. You confuse and conflate things, price and value, blockchain and money in this instance. Now it's up to you to learn the easy way or the hard way. I am betting, which I rarely do, on the hard way. So that was his comment to me yesterday on LinkedIn. Basically saying that I don't understand money, I confuse price and value, blockchain and money, and now I have to learn the hard way. So I want to give a shout out to him. It's an interesting comment. It seems like he has no idea what the hell he's talking about. Blockchain and money. Because even in Bitcoin, I do understand the difference between blockchain and money, because the Bitcoin blockchain itself is separate from Bitcoin. And I think most people who are fairly unfamiliar with Bitcoin just kind of group it all together. They think that the Bitcoin blockchain is Bitcoin. But in reality, the Bitcoin network itself, the layer one, which we talk about all the time here, this mempool, this is the Bitcoin blockchain itself. These are all just blocks. Within these blocks are transactions that you can get settled, confirmed within 5 minutes. And every time a new block is mined, this Bitcoin blockchain gets broadcast out to every single person in the world who's running a Bitcoin core software. It's just software. So every time a new block is mined, this gets broadcast out to every single person running a Bitcoin node. So with that, it makes it very difficult, impossible to change anything in the past. That's what makes it immutable. Because in order to go back and change a transaction that's already in a block, you'd have to go to every single person in the Bitcoin network, every person running the software, and get them to make that change, which is impossible. And so to say that I don't understand the difference between the blockchain and Bitcoin, I think it's easy to say maybe from LinkedIn posts, but it is something to keep in mind here that the Bitcoin network itself is different from the Bitcoin. So this is the network. The Bitcoin is just the currency that runs on top of this network. So shout out to Ian. Great comment. Or was it? I don't know. Saying I don't understand money. I'll tell you one thing. I didn't understand money when I went through 6 years of college, university, and my CPA. I didn't understand money. Or from growing up in school. This is all by design. There's a reason why they don't teach us about money in school or university or college. Because if people figured out their system that they work in and how controlled it is and centralized, I think there'd be a little bit more pushback from the general public. So I want to throw that in there. And how I want to tie this into the financial advisory thing is that I have noticed over the last little while, last year maybe, is that there are a lot of people on LinkedIn that are Bitcoiners. And this is a perfect example. So this guy made this big post about how he's saying goodbye to Bitcoin forever, never thinking about it again. 291 comments from people who were not so much agreeing with him. So that is positive. It's nice to see that Bitcoin is kind of becoming more and more welcome and accepted within the legacy system. So on that note, 291 comments. The advisors themselves are starting to ask questions about Bitcoin. Now that this Bitcoin ETF is a real thing, it's been approved and people can trade with it. Financial advisors are starting to ask questions about Bitcoin and starting to learn about it. So I met with a group of people yesterday, a financial firm, a smaller one, but they're interested in getting into Bitcoin, interested in learning about Bitcoin, interested in telling their clients about Bitcoin. So I think that now that Bitcoin has an ETF, now that it's somewhat legitimized within this financial system, there are going to be a huge shift of financial advisors taking this on. And it's not going to happen overnight. We saw the approval date, it came and went. None of this stuff happens overnight. And it's very important to understand that going forward here. But I'm not going to mention who they are. I do want to say a couple things, though, because I do very much admire their humility, I guess, in a way that it is hard to seek out a new asset that you're unfamiliar with that might potentially move money out of your other funds that make you more money. So I do give them a lot of credit for where they are right now, where they're going to be. And I guess before we go any further, I want to say that wherever you are, take the time in the next couple of weeks, call your advisor, email your advisor, text them, however you communicate with your financial advisor. Whether you know the answer or not, just mention Bitcoin to them. Say, what are your thoughts? How much time have you spent educating yourself on Bitcoin? And is there time for us to set up a meeting to see if I can get some Bitcoin? Like I said, they might already know you have Bitcoin. You might already know their stance. But I think the more people that can push this forward is only going to grow this network and push it in the right direction. And even for somebody like myself, who I'm obviously significantly invested into Bitcoin, I don't think that would be a surprise to anybody. But even for myself, who will keep the majority of my Bitcoin myself, store it myself, I'm still going to have a use for the Bitcoin ETF. And I think that a lot of people out there, people watching the show, are going to have some sort of use for their Bitcoin ETF. Whether you work at a job and your employer pays a portion of your retirement fund, you can start allocating some to Bitcoin. In my case, I'm going to use it as a tax-free kind of way to my liquid Bitcoin. Let's call it that. So you obviously want to have your significant amount of Bitcoin kept away, stored yourself, protected well. But everybody should also have a small exposure to the liquidity of Bitcoin, because if something comes up, if you have a fund, whether that's a trip coming up, you could move some Bitcoin into an ETF, let it sit there, get the price exposure to Bitcoin, and then cash that out whenever you see fit. Because I'm going to have a much harder time spending my long-term Bitcoin stack as compared to a Bitcoin ETF. So even though there is more risk involved there, obviously, if you're a Bitcoiner, you don't trust the institutions as much as yourself. But there is some benefit there for even Bitcoiners themselves to have some exposure to this Bitcoin ETF. And kind of along those same lines is that if you are somebody who has a financial advisor and they're very anti-Bitcoin, consider moving to somebody else who's more Bitcoin friendly. And you have the ability to do that very easily now. There's a ton of options out there for you. If you are in Canada and you want somebody who is Bitcoin friendly, just get in touch with me. Like I said, I'm not going to mention their name. I think that's kind of up to them to do their own communications in their own tone. But get in touch with me. These are 4 or 5 very great people, and I have a couple other connections as well if you're looking into the private equity side of things. But that's just something I wanted to throw out there in case you are in that situation right now. So I'm going to show this clip here because I did have this conversation kind of fired up for today, the financial advisors, after my discussion with them yesterday. And so I guess I got to remove this, but it is just a short 2-minute clip because I watched this after I was preparing for the show, and I thought that it was a perfect way to kind of get into this conversation here. Okay. So let me know if you can hear this. I'm going to mute myself here, and hopefully you can hear this. It's only 2 minutes long, but it talks about the opportunity here for financial advisors.
But the other point to build on what James was saying too is about the hot sauce. I like this. I haven't heard this. I'm gonna start using this because this is actually how I've thought about it. I got a core portfolio, and then I love commodities, right? Because I study geopolitics, and so I sort of feel like I have a tiny, not an edge. I'm certainly not an edge over the pro traders in it, but it's something I actually know. Whereas I was never an equity analyst, so me picking individual stocks is not something I'm into. But I like trading commodities, and so I have some stuff in that bucket. And I think about this is a way that financial advisors also now increasingly differentiate, because if everyone's basically buying the same versions of the same portfolios, and they really are. I mean, it's absolutely a giant portion of the market. Fidelity, you can even do this automated now. All the robo advisors, which now people aren't even really using anymore, but like they were doing this exact thing automatically for you without even a person.
Betterment has added crypto investments on their platform. They're a big robo advisor.
But this is a nice way if you're a financial advisor for regular people. I mean, I'm saying not at a hedge fund, not an endowment or whatever with specific things you have to do. If you're managing people's retirement and their family personal wealth, if everybody's basically about the same stuff, well, one thing you can do is say, well, actually, we have a guy here who was 20 years in the real estate business, so we actually are really good at like throwing in a little bit of some real estate investing, or we're really good at tech, or we're really good, right? And they do a little bit there. And I think that Bitcoin ETFs will be something that fits and helps to differentiate, because first of all, they get to go out with this like new story, right? And you don't get a new story very often in investing.
So you got a new thing to sell.
Exactly. But also you get to differentiate yourself. Like, I mean, you see Vanguard supposedly today saying they're never going to add them, right? Okay. And I've talked about this too. There are wealth platforms, BD, that are with broker dealers that, for example, don't let you buy cannabis stocks. I don't know why. They just don't like them. Right?
But it wasn't just them. Wasn't it Merrill as well?
Well, yeah.
That's a different platform.
And that's a different problem. Vanguard's basically saying, supposedly, there's a quote, right? They're actually saying they won't add them. Yeah. The others merely haven't yet added them. Let me say that. Yeah.
So do you think Vanguard will eventually...
All right, we're off mute. Hopefully that worked. Sound-wise, didn't see any comments in the chat, so that is a good thing, always. Figured this whole thing out. Maybe. I shouldn't jinx myself here. But we're starting to get the hang of things a little bit on the show. So that was a clip from what Bitcoin did yesterday, talking about the Bitcoin ETFs, the arrival of them, and the game theory involved here with financial advisors. They talked about an opportunity to differentiate, because historically we've had this 60-40 split. Financial advisors have typically, regardless of what age you're at, you can go a little bit more risky, but that has been the split, the 60-40 stocks and bonds model. And I think that now with the increase in excitement around gold, commodities, silver, and now this Bitcoin ETF, I do think that it is a very good chance for these smaller firms, these more boutique financial advisors, to get into this, to really go dive headfirst into this. Not all at once, obviously. And you don't have to do it public facing, but start getting your shit together in terms of finding somebody who knows about Bitcoin that can talk to your clients about Bitcoin. Because if you're failing to do that, I think you're doing a major disservice to your clients. And so how this is going to play out in my mind, and they mentioned it right at the end there about Vanguard. Vanguard came out and said that they're not going to be allowing their clients to buy this Bitcoin ETF. And what happened after that? What was the aftermath? Obviously, they haven't changed their mind yet. I don't know if they will or not. I did see something on Twitter yesterday, the fact that they've been getting thousands of calls and emails of people looking to switch from Vanguard because of their failure to give the okay to their clients over this Bitcoin ETF. And they're not going to be alone. There's going to be many institutions out there who are going to say to their clients, no, we're not letting you buy it. Regardless of how much you want to hold, 1%, 2%, 3%, we're not allowing it. And as that happens, kind of what we talked about at the start of the show here, is that those who fight Bitcoin, those who try to take Bitcoin on, are going to lose. And not only are they going to lose, but on the flip side of that, the people who are willing to embrace it, the financial advisors who are willing to embrace Bitcoin, I think are going to set themselves apart. It's not going to happen over a month or 6 months or even a year. But if you can get that edge and you can start right now in planning a strategy of how to navigate this Bitcoin thing, I think that is going to be a huge opportunity for financial firms, small ones especially, because the big boys are fat. They're very fat and slow, and it takes them forever to do anything. So by the time you're already offering Bitcoin ETFs to your clients, they're still having meetings about it and trying to hire somebody who can even start thinking about it. So that's kind of the idea there in terms of the game theory. The financial side of things, the countries, everybody who takes on Bitcoin will ultimately fail. So that's one aspect of it. And the other thing too is that we have to remember that nothing happens overnight. There is going to be a delay here. So right now, everywhere in this country, and probably the US too, but everywhere right now, these institutions are looking at Bitcoin ETF and wondering what to do with it. It's not like day one it was approved. Everybody had their clients lining up. Everything takes time. There's going to be a delay for these financial advisors to really wrap their head around what's going on, to start calling their clients about it. And that could be months, could be years even before everything's fully in sync here. Eventually, they will all bend the knee. Bitcoin just takes time. Keep learning. Great advice. Great advice. A little late, but caught the end of the show. We're not quite at the end of the show yet. Still got another 5-10 minutes, I'd say. Maybe. We'll see. I just want to talk about a couple more things, because during this conversation that I had with the financial advisors yesterday, they want me to help their clients educate themselves on Bitcoin so they can further understand it. And I think that the better that their clients understand Bitcoin, the more likely they'll be stomaching the volatility of Bitcoin, because it's going to be very easy over these next couple of years when they see the price of Bitcoin go up and they see their portfolio go up. But we know what happens with Bitcoin every 4 years historically, and it probably will keep happening. But once we get to the point where supply has caught up with the demand, it starts falling again. And the better educated their clients are, the better they're going to be able to handle this. Because if you educate your clients with the simple fact of get into this thing for 4 years, hold on to it, we're never going to think about it. We're going to hold it here and we're just going to see what happens. It could go up, it could go down. It doesn't matter. We're holding on to this asset for 4 years. And that's going to be good for your clients. That's going to be good for yourself. If you can educate your clients on that aspect of it, you're going to have much greater success with this Bitcoin thing. And one of the conversations was, if they had a client with, say, $10,000 who was 70 years old, is Bitcoin a good option for them? And I said, well, it's not the best option probably for a lot of people, but you have to consider a few different things here. So this is the thought experiment here. $10,000 free cash flow, 70 years old. Should they buy the Bitcoin ETF? And it really depends on what they want, what they have. So the first thing I said was, it depends. If they need that $10,000 to live off of, if that's kind of what they're hoping to live off of for the next year or two, or they need that for their groceries and rent, then probably not. Bitcoin is not the perfect asset for that, because it's going to go up, it's going to go down. And if you have to access that money, you could miss out on the gains within Bitcoin. So one thing I did say is that if they do want to, at 7 years old, if they want to think about their legacy, Bitcoin is going to be that option for them. They can buy a small amount or a large amount of Bitcoin, never think about it again, and just pass it down to their family. So I think that Bitcoin is going to be generational wealth, to say the least. And if they can kind of look at it that way and just hold on to it, doesn't matter what it's going to do while they're around, they're just going to pass it down to their family, like farmers do with land. And then the third option there is if they do have a ton of money and they're not going to miss this $10,000, I think that it is clinically insane to be not having some exposure to Bitcoin. If you can take $10,000 or $100,000, whatever your threshold is, and you're not going to miss that, you can sit on that and you can wait for the price to go up. You can be actively involved in this. There is a huge potential with this Bitcoin ETF for somebody like that. If it drops and they have to sell it, obviously, they don't need that cash and they won't be selling it. So that's kind of the idea there. You got a couple different options, even though there's just one age. It kind of depends on what they want and how much else is going on in their life, how much income they have. If they need to rely on that $10,000, then probably not. If they don't need to rely on it, then why wouldn't they? What's the alternative here? And that's kind of the other thing that I wanted to talk about. That was a 70-year-old example, somebody who's, at the end of their working career, wants to retire, but somebody who's 30 years old, 25, 30, 35 years old, 40. What's the alternative here? If you have some savings built up, what else are you going to be investing in that's going to beat the Bitcoin returns, expected returns, over these next 20 years? What's the alternative? And we talk about the risk reward involved with young people. It's like you can always make more money. You can always make that back. And it's not like there's any other investments out there who are making significant returns or, very likely that they'll be there in 20 years. I just don't see that other than Bitcoin right now. And plus there's a huge upside there if we get this thing right, if we're right about Bitcoin. So that's the question to investors right now. That's a question to financial advisors specifically, is like, what is the risk here? If you do this properly, if you educate your clients properly with the longer term mindset here, what's the risk? Because even with that example, say you have a client who's interested in Bitcoin and you want to allocate, say, 2 to 5% of their investment portfolio into Bitcoin. 2 to 5%. Stick with that for now. And so you have to think about that could go down a little bit, could go to zero. I mean, it's almost impossible at this point, but it could go to zero. But what's the upside there? Downside is you tried this out. It's a new thing. You've heard lots, you've done your due diligence on it. You think that this has a good chance of succeeding. So you advise them on that. If it fails, what's the worst case there? 2% of their portfolio drops a little bit. Flip side though, what's the upside there? What if it goes like we think it's going to go? What if all of a sudden they're invested in Bitcoin and they start telling their friends about it, how much their portfolio is going up? And then new clients start coming to you. And maybe if you decided to ignore it, I think that would be a bigger risk, because the clients who did approach you about Bitcoin and said, can you explain Bitcoin to me? I want to maybe buy some. And then it does shoot up. I think the risk of the disservice there that you're doing to your clients by telling them to avoid this thing, you are going to long-term suffer from that, because they're going to say, why wasn't I invested in Bitcoin? 2024, 2025, I think are going to be massive years in Bitcoin because of everything going on, the ETF, the halving, the hash rate, everything's setting up perfectly for Bitcoin right now. So 2024, 2025, I think are going to be the make or break for a lot of financial firms, because if they tell their clients to ignore Bitcoin, that it's a Ponzi scheme, that it's fake internet money, and they end up missing out on all these gains that all their friends are talking about, How are they going to feel? So that's the risk reward here, is like, if you're wrong about it, at least you tried. At least you tried educating yourself on it. At least you did your due diligence. You were trying to provide the best service to your clients. If Bitcoin goes wrong, but if it takes off like we think it's going to, and you told your clients to ignore it, I think that's going to be a huge risk to you. Question in the chat. Take a little break from the financial advisors. Feeling overwhelmed. And kind of, before we go any further there, let's talk about that, feeling overwhelmed. Because I think that there are a lot of people, there's a lot of investors out there, there's a lot of financial advisors out there who are overwhelmed with Bitcoin. The start of the meeting I had yesterday started with, can you try to explain, or can you give me a graphic on the difference between Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies? Or can you give me a graphic on this? I said, Bitcoin isn't something that we can just learn in an hour, 5 hours, 50 hours. The people who really have a deep understanding of Bitcoin have been in this for thousands or tens of thousands of hours. I've been in Bitcoin for 4 years now, probably 5-6 hours a day between podcasts, reading, checking things out online, just learning every day. That amount of time, 5 to 6 hours a day, learning Bitcoin for 4 years. And there's still so much that I have no idea about. Honestly, I'm still learning every day. There's so many different parts of Bitcoin, so many different things to consider, that it is impossible to try to do this all in one shot. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, you're definitely not alone, because there is a lot to know, but at the same time, it's very simple. You find a way to get some Bitcoin, you learn how to store that Bitcoin, and you forget about it, or you continue on. But what I would say for this person here in the chat, I have some invested, but what should I learn about first? So that's a good step. I think the first thing you can do is just buy some and learn how to store it later, but buy it with the mindset of, you're going to hold on to this asset for 4 years. I think that regardless of what you learn about the mempool, about how Bitcoin wallets work, which one to use, I think the most important thing you can do at that stage is just understand the fact that you're going to be here for at least 4 years. And if you can get through that, if you can stomach the ups and the downs and take a very stoic philosophy around Bitcoin, I think you're going to manage your entire investment portfolio better. You can celebrate, you can feel sad, but at the end of the day, you have to manage those expectations, because that's going to make you a better investor. Because when the price does drop, and it's going to drop, you don't care about it. You're not stressed out about it. You know that I'm here for 4 years. And at the end of that 4 years, that's when we can take a step back and reevaluate things. Like Greg Foss says, it's 100% certain that fiat will debase forever. That's what I mean. What is the alternative here? Like, there's nothing else out there that is going to be a certainty. Bitcoin's not a certainty, but I think it has a much higher chance of succeeding than the majority of other investments out there. And if you want to listen to a good, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing over. This is usually what happens at the end of the show. Start taking some comments from the chat, which is good. But I would recommend anybody out there, especially if you're a financial advisor, take a listen to an episode with Preston Pish. He did it on the last trade. I'll put the link in the description here below. I'll write that down so I don't forget. But he talks about just how inflated the stock market is right now. When you're looking at the stock to flow, how to value shares properly, and how incredibly inflated the stock market is right now compared to what these companies are actually worth. So I think the Microsoft share is trading around $600 right now. I think maybe $200. Either way, he said in his evaluation of it, because he's a stock market guy, that's the industry that he came from. But he said that Microsoft right now is not worth more than $30 per share. And that's just one very small part of the stock market and the fiat and everything that's so inflated right now. So good place to start there. Check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes here. Very interesting conversation. Preston's a very smart guy, very intelligent. I'm not I don't listen to a whole lot of his stuff, but the things that I have listened to, I've been very impressed with. So just to wrap this question up is, what should you learn about first? Honestly, what I would do if I was you is I would take some time and learn about the mining process of Bitcoin. I think that the majority of people, when they first get into it, they're chasing the price. And that's and that's all they focus on for the first 2 years of Bitcoin is the price. They don't care about anything else. They just want reassurance that the money that they invested is good. So all they do is they watch the price and they start listening to people who are saying good things about Bitcoin, which is, you might pick up a few things, but you're also going to go down this road of believing everything that you hear that you want to hear. And I think that that's a dangerous road to go down. So what I would say is go to mempool.space. We show this every day on the show, but go to mempool.space and, oh, that's not the window we want. Just when I said I had this figured out. Go to mempool.space. It's a website. You can see the Bitcoin blockchain. You can see each block, what's within that block, how everything works. And that's a good place to start. Learn about Bitcoin mining. I think that if you can figure that out, you can really understand what you're holding in Bitcoin. Another thing to do, stop by here every morning. Every morning, 8 a.m., we're doing shows between 20 minutes. The majority have been about 45 minutes. But we just talk things through. There's no agenda being pushed here. It's just us going through this whole thing together. And so just stick around. The more you can take in, the better. And as I mentioned kind of at the start of the show, is that I'm going to have a Bitcoin journey 21-day course. You learn how to buy, you learn how to store it, you learn how to send, receive, you learn which exchanges you can trust, which wallets you can trust, and some best practices and some tips to make sure that whatever Bitcoin you do buy, you're going to have in 10 years. So that 21 days, you get 2 check-ins with me for about an hour long. And if you get through that course in 21 days, you get half of your course fee back. So there is some incentive to actually get this done, because the quicker we can move in Bitcoin, I think the better off we're going to be. It's not going to change in an hour or a day or a week, but historically, if you wait on Bitcoin, you're always going to get less sats when you do decide to do it. So good on you for taking the leap. But now it is time to educate yourself and really understand what you're holding here. Great point from Miles here in the chat. Listen to podcasts, watch videos. I think the more you can overwhelm yourself, the better. Very uncomfortable to do. I've listened to hundreds of hours of podcasts where I understood maybe 2 minutes out of the whole hour. Also great for falling asleep too. If your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband is okay with that, good to fall asleep to. But just be okay the fact that you're not going to be able to understand everything. That's not the point here. The point here is that you're exposing yourself to it through osmosis of learning. You're going to pick up on things. And as you see new things in your life, you're going to start connecting these dots and going back to that. Oh, that makes sense because I heard about this. And the more touch points you can have with these more complex issues, I think the better off you're going to be. Great point from Chrysler here. If individuals knew the price of their homes on a daily basis, they wouldn't be able to sleep. Yet real estate is considered one of the most stable investments. If you knew the value of your house was 40% less than yesterday, would you sell it? Of course not. Real estate is something that we've been trained to believe is our most stable asset investment, as Chrysler said here. And I also think a portion of that is the housing prices have been significantly inflated with the stock market, with our currency, with our real estate in Canada here, significantly inflated. Look at the cost of a house in 1970 or 60 compared to today. It's insane. It's insane. And people don't even understand how much their house cost them. You get a $500,000 house, that's the list price on it, but you got to pay 5% interest rate on that. That house costs you close to $1 million, even though the list price is only $500,000. That's only the principal portion of it. That's not factoring in the interest payment that for the first 10 years of that mortgage is going to be more interest than principal. Oh, that's interesting, Miles. So Miles says he's been testing his Bitcoin knowledge occasionally by creating challenging tests in ChatGPT. Interesting. Miles, I don't know if you were here on the show the other day, but I talked about the decentralized version of Unleash.chat. I don't know if it is decentralized or not. I know that even though it's called OpenAI, ChatGPT is definitely not open. They're pushing some very questionable agendas through that AI. But this one's called Unleash.chat, and the creator of it also makes the best Bitcoin device on the market, the Cold Card. So check that out, Unleashed.chat. I've been playing around a little bit with it. It's very easy to use, and I think that there's less woke agendas being pushed through there. And that's going to evolve too. I think that you'll be able to pay in Bitcoin for these AI bots doing your bidding. Very cool stuff happening. And that's one aspect of Bitcoin I think that people are failing to really appreciate is there are things like Unleash.chat. There was another one too. It's called Vendata. So you can essentially create a job for AI, whether you want them to generate a new image for you or write a letter, whatever it is. You can put out a bid to the AIs, the bots. And I don't know what happened here just now. I think we're still alive. But you can say, this is my bounty. I'm going to put up 10,000 sats. If any AI wants to do this job, or human, I guess. I think that if you have some time on your hands and you want to work for some sats, you can do that. But the idea here is that we're going to be paying AI to do jobs like that. And it's already here. It's called Vendata, vendata.io. VEN. I'll put in the show notes too. It's going to be some heavy show notes today. Holy, it's windy out. Okay, we're still alive. Good. It's been a great show to listen to. Thank you. I appreciate that. We're a little bit blurry here, but that's the point. We just want to talk things through. We're not pushing any sort of agendas. We're asking questions. We're talking things through. We're trying to think a little bit differently here because Bitcoin is such a different asset than we've ever had before. Technology-wise and the fixed aspect of Bitcoin. We've never had an asset like that before. So it is very challenging for a lot of people to understand. And when that happens, I think a lot of people just shut off and don't want to take time to learn about it. So all they rely on is the information that they've heard from the media, from the governments. And as soon as you rely on that information as your source, you're going to be in some trouble. And maybe to end the show, I don't usually get political on here, but if you made it this far, I'm sure you don't really give a shit what I say. But one piece of advice that I've followed for the last 4 years is that whatever advice the government has, whether that's for medical stuff, whether that's for investment stuff, Pierre Polivier came out and said, our dollar's losing value here. Consider investing in Bitcoin. And the federal government, the Liberal government in Canada just jumped all over him. And this is a time when Bitcoin was kind of going down. And so everybody in the Liberal Party was just jumping on Pierre for saying this about Bitcoin. Why would you ever invest in this Ponzi scheme? It's too volatile, too risky. Why would you mislead people like that? 1 year later, it's up 150% since Pierre started talking about it. So my advice that I follow, very simple, is whatever the government tells you to do, you just do the exact opposite of that. And in this case, it would have worked out well for you. And if I ended up losing a few viewers for that comment, I really do not care. I don't. I'm just so tired of living in this eggshell world where you have to watch what you say and just pretend that everything that's happening is normal. And accepting the 1% or 2% of people and kind of focusing our whole system around those people. It's just insane. And I think that it's time that we change that. So 21 days is the course. Can't say that was a coincidence. 21 days, 21 million Bitcoin. And 21 days, I think, is a very doable milestone for people. Originally, I had the course was going to be like 3 or 4 months long. Take your time with it. But I was just like, you know what? Let's start this. Let's do like half an hour, 20 minutes a day for 21 days, 2 check-ins. And then if you finish that in 21 days, you get half your course feedback. So if you're interested in that, Mr. Monbent or Mrs. Monbent, just send me an email and you can be one of the first people to go through the course. Very reasonably priced too, compared to some courses out there. And this one actually includes 2 check-ins, which when I first got into Bitcoin or crypto, I paid $500 US for access to like a private subscription thing. So I had access to videos, how to buy, how to move it around, but I never had access to anybody in person. I didn't have the ability to ask questions that were on my mind. So I think this course is going to be perfect for people like that, who want somebody to answer questions. And the beauty of that course is that I'm actually you're going to register, you're going to download a wallet. And then in our first check-in, we're actually going to buy the Bitcoin and send it to your wallet. So you're going to take it off the exchange. You're going to take self-custody of that Bitcoin. And I'm going to be there the entire time to make sure that there's no errors there. Because at the end of the day, when you're getting into Bitcoin, you are going to make mistakes. Everybody does. The idea here is that we want to limit that amount of Bitcoin that you lose. 88 Sats Radio, no second best morning show. Have a great day, Bitcoiners. Wow. I appreciate that, my friend. You're in good company. I figured that. Bitcoin is for everybody. We should never tell people whether they can or can't own Bitcoin, whether it's BlackRock. Bitcoin is for enemies. It's for everybody. And that you need a currency like that. It doesn't matter who's using it. It matters who is controlling it and printing it. And with Bitcoin, these centralized authorities, governments, central banks do not have the ability to print Bitcoin. And that's why it's going to win. It's just going to take some time to get there. So we're 52 minutes. Wow, 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 wow. Have yourselves an amazing day. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to get in touch with me, 88sats@proton.me, 88sats@proton.me. Every Thursday we do a live Q&A, so you can either show up in the chat or you can send in your questions beforehand, and we cover that every Thursday morning. My favorite day of the week. So have yourself a great day, the best Tuesday of your life, and we'll see you first thing tomorrow morning right back here. Appreciate you very much. Bye-bye.